I want to end with happiness, and it's a strange thing to talk about in psychology. Most of psychology focuses on human misery, most of clinical psychology. There's the psychology we spoke about through most of the semester on vision and language and social behavior, but typically when people think about interventions, what they think about is people having problems, and then we figure out how to make them better. They're schizophrenic, they're depressed, they're anxious, they're just not making it in life. And psychologists try to figure out how to make things improve. And in fact, a lot of the information I gave you at the beginning of lecture last class, where I reviewed all of the disorders, is in this wonderful book called DSM-4, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. If you ever really want to diagnose people and come to have a belief in your own mental instability, browsing through that book is a treat. Everything that can go wrong in mental life, from Asperger's syndrome to fetishes to paranoid schizophrenia, is all in that wonderful book. But a lot of psychologists have been disturbed by the focus of our field on taking bad people, people who are broken, people who are sad, and bringing them up to normal. And they've started to ask, can psychology give us any insight into human flourishing? How to take people how to study people who are psychological successes, how to take people who are psychologically okay and make them better. And this is the movement known as positive psychology, and it has its own handbook now, the Handbook of Positive Psychology, listing psychological strengths, listing virtues, ways, what psychology tells us about how we can be at our best. Some of this work in positive psychology is, in my mind, real crap. A lot of it is some combination of new age banalities by people who are striving to get more grant funds and end up on Time magazine. On the other hand, and so some of it is really bad. You could imagine this attracts every self-help huckster you could imagine. On the other hand, a lot of this work is quite neat, quite interesting, and quite promising. And what I want to do is tell you what I think is the most interesting research from this movement concerning happiness. Now, there are a lot of good books on this, and I'm going to recommend books, which I haven't been doing much in this class. Marty Seligman is the pioneer of positive psychology, and he's written an excellent book called Authentic Happiness. Jonathan Haidt is a brilliant young scholar who's also done a lot of work on disgust and morality. He did the sex with dead chicken study we discussed earlier. This is one of my favorite books, by Happiness by Nettle, because it's smart, it's beautifully written, and it's extremely short. And Dan Gilbert's book, Stumbling on Happiness, is a very, very funny book and very smart book, and is now in a New York Times bestseller list. So there's no shortage of books on happiness. So the starting point is, and a lot of research on happiness starts with a basic question: how happy are you? And we're psychologists, so tell us on a scale of 1 to 10, where 5 is average, 10 is super duper. The most common answers, interestingly enough, are high. They're 7 or 8. How many people in this room would give themselves a 7 or an 8? Okay. How many a 9 or a 10? All right. How many a 10? Good, good. Maxed out on happiness. It turns out that most people think that they're pretty happy. There's a Lake Wobegon effect with happiness. Most people think they're very happy. In fact, most people think they're happier than most people, which shouldn't really happen. This question, how happy are you, from 1 to 10, has been asked all over the world. So, and it turns out there are slight differences depending on how old you are. There are slight differences depending on your place within a country, California versus New York. There are slight, subtle differences between men and women at different points. Somewhat paradoxically, although women are more vulnerable to depression than men, still, on average, women are slightly happier than men. The country-by-country data is quite interesting. In one study, they looked at 42 countries. The happiest, well, let me see. The happiest people on earth. Well, first, no country believed they were unhappy. The people in no country of these 42 countries. I mean, you're thinking there's some really bad countries to live in, and I don't know if they were tested. But of these 42, everybody said they were above average. The happiest people on earth, the Swiss. They think they're just so happy. I was talking to people about this last night, and they suggested chocolate. The saddest people on the sample, the sad Bulgarians. You are wondering, what about Americans? Americans are actually pretty happy. 7.7 when we are a happy country, full of happy people. Now, I'm going to talk about a lot of research that's based on the data you get when you ask people how happy they are from a scale of 1 to 10. But I'm going to be honest and tell you there are reasons to be cautious about these numbers. And the reasons come from a couple of experiments. In one experiment, they asked people inside a psychology department where there was a photocopy machine. They went up to people, the people were going up to the photocopy machine to make copies, and when they were done making copies, they asked them, how happy are you with your entire life? There were two groups. Group A, they put a dime on top of the photocopy machine. So people walked around, I'm going to have to do my figure. Oh, a dime. Oh. Other group, no dime. It turned out that when asked, how good is your whole life? Group A reported greater life satisfaction overall in their entire lives. Another study asked people how happy you are with your whole life on sunny days, like today. And people said they were happier on sunny days than rainy days. What's interesting is you can make this effect go away if you ask immediately before, how's the weather? These were done by phone interviews. And logically, what seems to go on is that if you're asked how's the weather, oh, it's really sunny outside. And then when people are asked how happy are you with your whole life, people then say, oh, okay, I'm going to take into account the sunniness when I give my answer. Okay, so what is happiness? What are people rating when they're answering these sort of questions? And this is an extraordinarily difficult question, and one could devote a seminar to discussing it. But one simple answer from an evolutionary point of view is that happiness, forget about what is happiness, ask what's happiness for. Just like we've asked what language is for, or what laughter is for, or what hunger or lust is for. What's happiness for? And one answer is happiness is a goal state that we've evolved to pursue. It's a signal that our needs have been satisfied. Happiness is the carrot we're running towards that makes us take care of our lives. We want to be happy. An example of this is food. You're not very happy if you're starving. You want to be satiated. You want to be satisfied. So you seek out food to fill your belly. Once you've done it, you're happy. Steven Pinker summarizes the keys to happiness in a nicely evocative passage. We are happier when we are healthy, well-fed, comfortable, safe, prosperous, knowledgeable, respected, non-celibate, and loved. How many people here got all of those right now? Oh, come on. Some people. Oddly enough, the person who said he was a 10 is not raise his hand. Okay. So this is, and this makes out, you get all your needs satisfied. You know, your belly is full, people love you, you're getting sex regularly, you're smart, you're rich, you're happy. But as Pinker points out, it's not that simple. Here's the problem. You, Americans in this century, you are now healthier, better fed, and so on, than just about anyone in history. But you're not happier. That's the puzzle. In particular, these studies asking about happiness have been around for a long time. People in the 1950s did not make as much money, did not eat as well, did not live as long, suffered from more diseases, were more vulnerable in 100 different ways. Yet they are as happy as you are now. You are as happy as your parents were, and they were as happy as your grandparents. Moreover, in poor countries, people don't have the shelter, the knowledge, the protection, the safety. Yet, for the most part, there's not a huge effect on how rich a country is and on how happy the people are. Furthermore, there are great individual differences in happiness among people whose basic needs are met. For the most part, everybody in this room is fed and sheltered and safe. Some of you are prosperous, some of you are knowledgeable, a couple non-celibate. But even among that group, you vary in your happiness. And that's kind of a puzzle. And to explain the puzzle, we need to talk about a few surprising facts about happiness. And I'll present 3 of them. The first is, happiness doesn't change as much as you think. In particular, happiness is not as sensitive to what happens. Your happiness is not as sensitive to what happens in your environment as you might think it is. Part of the reason for this is that there appears to be a strong heritable basis for happiness. So just as we talked in the domains of personality and intelligence, there's some genetic determination, not entirely, but some, in how happy you are. And some people talk in terms of a genetically determined set point. So you have a sort of natural happiness level, maybe a range. To put it in extreme form, some people are genetically predisposed to be pretty sour, others to be pretty cheerful. Well, that can't be it. Identical twins are very similar in their happiness, but as with everything else we've discussed, they're not identical. What about life events? Wouldn't life events change your happiness? And here we're entering one of the great discoveries of happiness research. Think for a moment, what's the worst thing that could happen to you? And then ask, how much would it change your happiness? Now think for a moment, what's the best thing that could happen to you? And ask, how much would it change your happiness? And the research in happiness suggests that your gut feelings are probably wrong. And here's a couple of case studies. For many people, a very bad thing that could happen to you is to be paralyzed from the neck down in an accident. It turns out, obviously, common sense, that when this happens, it makes people very unhappy. It makes them depressed. They think their life is over. They feel terribly sad. But not for that long. After about a year, after being paralyzed from the neck down, people's happiness comes back up pretty much to where it was before, suggesting that there's a temporary effect, but not a permanent one. Many people believe that winning many, many millions of dollars in the lottery will make you happier. And it does. When you open up that winning ticket, you say, I won $100 million. You say, woohoo. You are, honest to God, very happy. You'd say, hell, I'm at 10.5. I am very happy. A year later, you are not as happy. In fact, lottery winning may be a terrible case where it goes the reverse of what you expect. What happens when you win a lot of money is it often wrenches you away from your family, your work, and your friends, and leads you to depression and sadness. But even mundane events that would make you happy, that you think would make you happy, don't seem to last. In some research by Dan Gilbert and others, they've asked young assistant professors who are coming up for tenure, and tenure in a university system is a good thing to get because it gives you lifetime job security. How happy would you feel if you got tenure? How happy would you feel if you didn't get tenure? Prior to the last election, They asked people, how happy would you be if it was President Bush? How happy would you be if it was President Kerry? And it turns out people radically overestimated the effects of these things. Having your favorite candidate win is not such a big deal. Having your favorite candidate lose is not such a big deal either. Getting tenure, not getting tenure are really big when it happens. 6 months later and a year later, your happiness doesn't seem to be affected. The purchase of consumer goods, an Xbox 360, a nice flat screen TV, those sorts of things, make you very happy when you open up the package and set it up. But this happiness fades almost immediately. The moral of a lot of people are shaking their heads, it's true. I mean, not for me. But the moral of a lot of this work is we think these things will have big, permanent, and profound effects. But they need not, and they often don't. Why not? Why do we overestimate their happiness? And the technical term for this, by the way, is affective forecasting. Again, this is Dan Gilbert's work. And the idea is we are bad at affective forecasting. That is, we are bad at predicting how happy or sad we will be in the future based on what's happening to us. Why? Well, a couple of reasons. One thing is there's often a failure to appreciate the day-to-day irrelevance of certain events. So prior to the election, you know, the election's happening tomorrow, and I ask somebody who's a diehard Democrat, how would you feel if Bush won? And the person said, I'll be miserable. It'd be a miserable 4 years afterwards. But what often isn't appreciated here is that whether or not Bush wins will make you sad or happy after it happens, but for the most of your day-to-day life, you aren't thinking about who the president is. I'd be very happy if I won a huge prize. And I'd be, well, whoa, huge prize, the Nobel Prize, a Guggenheim, a MacArthur Genius Award. I get them all on the same day. What a day. I am really happy. But then, you know, a month later, I'm there, and I still got my regular insomnia, and there's nothing on TV, and, you know, and the plumber's not coming, and, you know, my kids don't respect me, and I can't say, I can't, and the fact that, yeah, but I won the prize, it doesn't matter. A lot of the things in life that'll make you really, that you think will make you really happy, don't have this day-to-day effect. Also, there's the logic of the set point, and this comes to a terrible word. We adapt. Right now, I'm a guy without a Nobel Prize. I'm kind of used to it. If I got a Nobel Prize, I'd be a guy with a Nobel Prize. I'd be happy. But then, I kind of get used to that too. If I got a second one, whoa, 2! But then I just get used to that too. You get used to things. You get used to bad things. Now, I don't want to overstate this. There's some very interesting exceptions. So, for instance, we don't get used to noise. A lot of research suggests that if your environment is noisy, like they're doing construction around you, you can't get used to it. Your happiness drops and it doesn't come back up. Your system cannot habituate to continued noise. We adapt to good things. Winning the lottery, winning a prize, getting an A in a course. We adapt, we get used to it. Also with some surprising exceptions. One of the other surprises from happiness research is the effects of cosmetic surgery, like breast enhancement and breast reduction. One of the big surprises is it makes people happier, and then they stay happier. And one explanation for this is how we look is very important. It's very important for how other people see us and how we see ourselves. And you never get used to looking in a certain way. So if you look better, it just makes you happier all the time. So there are these exceptions. But putting aside the exceptions, the problem of adaptation is sometimes called the hedonic treadmill. And the idea is hedonic for happy. You keep on running, but no matter how fast you run, you stay where you are. You get used to it. Habituation is like you step into a very hot bath, but you get used to it. It's a cold bath. You get used to it. A difficult environment, an easy environment, you get used to it. The story is often illustrated. With a story from the Bible in Ecclesiastes of a king, and this king had it all. He had gardens, parks, vineyards, castles, slaves, and concubines, and they were both male and female concubines. So he had everything, right? But it didn't make him happy. And here's what he says: I hated life. All is vanity and a chasing after wind, and there is nothing to be gained under the sun. Now, in these books I talked about at the beginning, these authors give advice on how to deal with the hedonic treadmill. How do you deal with the fact that everything you aspire to, once you get it, you'll be used to it, and it will lose its value? Well, one answer is that possessions are not the key to happiness. Possessions you very quickly get used to. From there are two alternatives. One is endless novelty. So one guy, I forget his name, wrote a book, and he says, look, there's a hedonic treadmill. The trick is, always do something different. Next week, have sex with somebody you've never had sex before. Then, climb Mount Everest. You get bored with that, become an accountant. Boring. Scuba diving. Boring. He had endless ideas. And that's the possibility. If you keep changing what you're doing, you'll never get used to anything. And you'll always be happy. At least he says that. Then there's the old guy alternative. Step off the treadmill. Give up. Give up chasing the whole happiness thing. And then seek out more substantial goods that might actually not make you happy in the simple sense of a quick fix of delight, but substantial goods like friends and family and long-term projects. So the first moral of the science of happiness is that your happiness is actually rather fixed. It's fixed in part genetically, and it's fixed in part because what happens in your life you'll get used to a large extent. You raising your hands? Oh, sorry. The second one is happiness is relative. So there's a lot of research on money, power, and happiness. And remember, I did say before that it doesn't matter whether you come from a rich country or a poor country. As long as you're not starving to death, it kind of doesn't matter how rich your country is for how happy you are. But that's not the same as saying it doesn't matter how much money you make. In fact, there's a set point or a range, but there's some effect on your salary and on your job, on your happiness. And if you're desperately poor, no matter where you are, no matter who's around you, you're not going to be happy. But beyond that, your happiness depends on your relative circumstance. And this is an old insight. H.L. Mencken wrote, "A wealthy man is one who earns $100 more than his wife's sister's husband." The idea is, what matters isn't how much you make. What matters is how much you make relative to the people around you. And they've asked people this. What would you rather? You want to make $70,000 if everybody else in your office is making $65,000? Or $75,000 if everybody else is making $80,000? Does it matter how much money you bring home, or does it matter how much money you make relative to other people? Well, they're both factors. But relative salary, and in this example, people prefer this. They prefer to be making less if they're making more than the people around them. It turns out that there's research on British social servants, and their happiness and their health and the quality of their relationships and how they love their lives isn't depend on how much money they make. It depends on where they are relative to everybody else. We are very status-conscious primates, and your role in a hierarchy, your level in a hierarchy, has a significant effect on your level of happiness. This is not really a secret. the opera star Maria Callas and the English professor Stanley Fish had the same negotiating strategy. When Fish got hired into his department, according to urban legend at least, he said, I don't want to talk salary. I don't have a particular number in mind. I just want to get paid $100 more than whoever's the top person in this department. And that's a guy who knows about happiness. He walks in each day saying, I'm paid more than everybody else. I don't care how much it is. It's just more. And that's relevant to happiness. We're now in a position to give some advice to the king, summing up. First, going back again to Dr. Nolan Huxama's lecture, I think the king is suffering from mild unipolar depression. So you should get some SSRIs and cognitive behavior therapy. I think he needs to move his castle to a quiet part of the kingdom. The noise of a busy castle is stressful. And he needs to give up on the concubines. He needs to find a queen. He needs to develop social relationships, join a club, get involved in charities, maybe a hobby.